The courtroom felt like a cathedral of judgment that morning, all dark oak and filtered sunlight cutting through tall windows in dusty beams. Every surface seemed to absorb sound, making each breath, each shuffle of paper, each nervous cough echo with unnatural clarity. Judge Elias Monroe sat elevated behind the bench, his silver hair catching the light, his weathered face unreadable as stone. At 63, he'd presided over thousands of cases, but his eyes still held that rare quality, the ability to see through pretense straight to the marrow of truth. He didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. His presence did that work for him. If you enjoy watching privilege meet consequence, hit that like button right now. This one's unforgettable. Across the well of the court sat Victoria Ashford Chen, 26 years old, and worth more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. She wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost what a schoolteacher made in 3 months. Her dark hair pulled back in a style that was somehow both casual and impossibly expensive. Diamond studs glittered at her ears. Her manicured hands rested on the defense table with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd never truly faced consequences for anything. The charges were serious: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an accident. The victim, Marcus Webb, sat in the gallery with his left arm in a cast, his face still bearing the purple-yellow remnants of severe bruising. He was a bike courier, 32 years old, who'd been trying to make his rent when Victoria's white Range Rover had swerved into the bike lane during an argument she was having on her phone. Marcus had ended up under her front wheel. She'd stopped long enough to see him bleeding on the pavement, then driven away because, as she'd later told police, she had a reservation at a restaurant that didn't accept late arrivals. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Reeves, stood to present her closing argument. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Traffic camera footage shows Ms. Ashford Chen's vehicle crossing into the bike lane without signaling. Witnesses heard her screaming at someone on her phone moments before impact. Mr. Webb suffered a compound fracture, severe lacerations, and a concussion. And rather than render aid, rather than even call for help, the defendant left him bleeding in the street so she wouldn't miss dinner." Victoria's attorney, a man named Charles Brightwell, who charged $800 an hour, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets this unfortunate accident. She was startled by the unexpected collision, panicked, and made a poor decision in the heat of the moment. She has no prior criminal record. She's willing to compensate Mr. Webb generously for his medical expenses and pain and suffering. We ask the court to consider probation and community service rather than incarceration." Monroe's gaze shifted to Victoria. "Does the defendant wish to address the court?" Brightwell touched her arm, a clear signal to remain silent, but Victoria brushed him off. She stood, and something in her posture, the slight tilt of her chin, the way her mouth curved at the corners, suggested she thought this was all theater, a performance she could control with the right words. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and confident, "I want to say that I am truly sorry this man was hurt. It was a terrible accident, and yes, I should have stayed, but I think we need to keep this in perspective." She paused, as if gathering her thoughts, but Monroe could see the calculation behind her eyes. "I'm a job creator, Your Honor. My family's company employs over 2,000 people. We donate millions to charity every year. I sit on the board of 3 hospitals. The economic impact of sending me to jail would be significant. And frankly, I think Mr. Webb and his attorney see this as a lottery ticket." The courtroom went very still. Marcus Webb's shoulders tensed. Linda Reeves's pen stopped moving mid-note. Victoria continued, seemingly encouraged by the attention. "I'm willing to write a check right now for whatever amount this court thinks is fair. Mr. Webb can have the money today, but let's be honest about what this really is. A working-class person trying to extract wealth from someone who has it. That's not justice. That's opportunism." Monroe's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air around him, like the pressure drop before a storm. "Ms. Ashford Chen, are you finished?" "Almost, Your Honor." I just want to add that I respect this court and the legal system. I really do. But you have to understand, people like me, we make society function. We pay the taxes that fund these courtrooms. We employ the people who serve on juries. We donate to politicians who write the laws. In a very real sense, Your Honor, you sit on that bench because people like me and my family allow it. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, I'm just stating a fact. So, yes, I'll pay whatever fine you impose, but I think we all know that jail time would be disproportionate for someone of my standing and contributions to society. The silence that followed was profound. Brightwell had gone pale, his hand half raised, as if he wanted to pull his client back down into her seat, but couldn't quite reach her. Linda Reeves sat perfectly still, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes bright with something that might have been satisfaction or fury or both. Marcus Webb stared at Victoria with an expression of pure disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process that she'd actually said those words out loud. Monroe leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of his face. He stayed that way for 15 seconds that felt like 15 minutes. When he finally lowered his hands and leaned forward, every eye in the courtroom locked onto him. "Ms. Ashford Chen," he said quietly, "I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You believe that your family's wealth entitles you to different treatment under the law. You believe that Mr. Webb is engaged in some form of extortion by seeking accountability for injuries you caused. And you believe that judges, that I, serve at the pleasure of wealthy donors and taxpayers. Is that a fair summary of what you just told this court?" Victoria hesitated, perhaps sensing for the first time that she'd miscalculated. "I just meant that context matters, Your Honor." "Context?" Monroe nodded slowly. "Let me provide some context, Ms. Ashford Chen. 27 years ago, I was a prosecutor in this county. We had a case, a hit and run, much like yours. The victim was a 9-year-old girl on her way to school. The driver was a prominent businessman who'd had too much to drink at a breakfast meeting. He hit her in a crosswalk and kept driving. When we found him, he told us essentially what you just told me, that his contributions to society should outweigh one moment of poor judgment, that his companies employed hundreds of people, that jail time would be disproportionate." The judge paused, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "That little girl's name was Sarah Chen. She spent 3 months in the hospital. She walks with a limp to this day. And that businessman served 18 months in prison, because I stood in a courtroom not unlike this one and told the judge that justice cannot have a price tag attached to it, that the value of a human being cannot be measured in tax payments or charitable donations, that the law must mean the same thing whether you're a CEO or a janitor." Victoria had gone very still, her confident posture beginning to crack. Monroe continued, his voice gaining strength. "You stand here today and tell me that you allow me to be a judge, that your family's money gives you the right to different treatment, that a man whose arm you broke, whose skull you fractured, whose life you endangered is somehow trying to cheat you by seeking accountability. And you expect me to nod along with this reasoning because you can write a check." He stood now, something he rarely did, and the movement commanded absolute attention. "Let me tell you what I see, Ms. Ashford Chen. I see a young woman who has never been told no, who has never faced real consequences, who believes so deeply in her own superiority that she can't even recognize the grotesque callousness of her own words. You didn't just hit Marcus Webb with your car. You hit him, saw him bleeding, and chose your dinner reservation over his life. And now you stand in my courtroom and call him opportunistic for wanting you to be held accountable." The judge's voice dropped lower, but somehow it filled every corner of the room. "I have sat on this bench for 19 years. I have sentenced murderers and thieves, domestic abusers and con artists. But I can count on one hand the number of times I have seen such casual, unthinking cruelty, combined with such absolute certainty of superiority. You are not a victim here, Ms. Ashford Chen. You are not being persecuted by the poor. You are being held to the same standard as every other citizen who comes before this court. No more, no less. Monroe sat back down, but his presence seemed even larger than before. The law does not care about your last name. It does not care about your family's bank account. It does not care about the boards you sit on or the parties you attend. The law cares about one thing: whether you acted with criminal disregard for human life, and the evidence shows conclusively that you did. He picked up his gavel, holding it loosely in his right hand. Before I impose sentence, I want to say something directly to you, Ms. Ashford Chen, and to everyone in this courtroom. The idea that wealth grants immunity from accountability is not just wrong, it is poison to the foundation of civil society. Every time a person of means escapes consequences because of their money, every time justice bends to accommodate privilege, we betray the core promise of the legal system, that all people are equal under the law. That promise is fragile. It requires constant defense, and it falls to judges and juries and prosecutors and defense attorneys to uphold it every single day in every single case. He looked at Victoria with something that might have been pity. You asked me to consider your contributions to society. I have. I've weighed your charitable donations, your family's employment numbers, your seat on hospital boards, and you know what I found? That none of it gives you the right to break a man's bones and drive away. None of it entitles you to mock his suffering. None of it places you above the law. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that made several people in the gallery jump. Victoria Ashford Chen, I find you guilty on all counts. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison. On the charge of leaving the scene of an accident causing serious injury, I sentence you to an additional 2 years, to run consecutively. On the charge of reckless endangerment, I sentence you to 1 year, also consecutive. Total sentence, 7 years in state prison. You will be remanded into custody immediately. You will serve a minimum of 85% of this sentence before being eligible for parole. Victoria's face had gone from confident to pale to ashen. Your Honor, please. I'm not finished, Ms. Ashford Chen. In addition to incarceration, you will pay full restitution to Marcus Webb for all medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. The exact amount will be determined in a separate hearing, but I am ordering a minimum of $500,000. You will also complete 1,000 hours of community service upon your release, specifically working with traffic safety organizations and victims of vehicular assault. And you will lose your driving privileges for 10 years following your release from prison. Brightwell was on his feet. Your Honor, this sentence is excessive. Monroe's gaze cut to him like a blade. Mr. Brightwell, your client told me that I serve at the pleasure of wealthy taxpayers. She suggested that her money entitled her to mercy she would deny others. She looked at a man whose life she nearly destroyed and called him opportunistic for seeking justice. If you believe this sentence is excessive for someone who demonstrated such profound contempt for human life and the rule of law, then you and I have very different understandings of justice. He turned back to Victoria, who was now openly crying. Her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. You wanted me to consider context, Ms. Ashford Chen. I have. The context is that you had every advantage in life: wealth, education, opportunity, and you used those advantages to believe yourself exempt from basic human decency. Maybe 7 years will give you time to reconsider that belief. Maybe it will teach you that a person's worth is not measured in dollars. Maybe it will help you understand that justice is not something the rich grant to the poor as a favor. It is a right that belongs to everyone equally. The bailiff approached Victoria's table. She looked at Brightwell in desperation, but he could only shake his head. The reality of her situation was finally settling over her like a weight. The courtroom she'd walked into with such confidence had become the place where her entire world had shifted on its axis. As the bailiff placed handcuffs on her wrists, Victoria's legs nearly gave out. The cream suit that had looked so elegant now seemed like a costume from another life. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she was led toward the door that would take her to the holding cells. She looked back once at the gallery, at the faces watching her exit, and for the first time since the trial began, something like real understanding flickered across her features. Not remorse, perhaps, not yet, but at least the beginning of comprehension that the rules applied to her after all. Marcus Webb sat very still in the gallery, his good hand gripping the back of the bench in front of him. Linda Reeves leaned over to whisper something to him, and he nodded slowly, his eyes bright with tears that might have been relief or vindication or simple exhaustion. He'd been hit by a car, left to bleed in the street, and then forced to watch his attacker try to buy her way out of consequences. The verdict wouldn't undo his injuries, but it did something else. It affirmed his fundamental worth as a human being. It said that his broken arm mattered, that his suffering counted, that he was not merely an obstacle to be compensated and dismissed. Judge Monroe waited until the door closed behind Victoria before speaking again. "This court stands adjourned." The gavel fell once more and people began to file out, their conversations hushed and electric. Some were shocked by the severity of the sentence. Others felt it was exactly what justice demanded. But everyone who'd been in that courtroom would remember it, would remember the moment a young woman's arrogance met the immovable force of equal justice under law. Monroe remained on the bench for a few moments after the courtroom emptied, his eyes on the papers in front of him, but his mind somewhere else. He thought about Sarah Chen, the little girl from 27 years ago, who still walked with a limp. He thought about all the Marcus Webbs of the world, ordinary people trying to live ordinary lives who deserved the law's protection just as much as anyone else. He thought about the constant pressure to soften justice for those who could afford good lawyers, about the subtle and not so subtle ways that wealth tried to insulate itself from accountability. And he thought about the job he'd been doing for 19 years, not because wealthy families allowed him to, but because a society of laws required people willing to uphold them without favoritism or fear. It was exhausting work. It required constant vigilance, but it was necessary work because the alternative was a world where justice was just another commodity that only the rich could afford. He gathered his papers, stood, and walked to his chambers, already thinking about the next case on his docket. Another story, another chance to prove that the law meant what it said, that all people were equal in its eyes, that privilege was not armor against consequence. The work never ended, but then again, neither did the responsibility. Outside the courthouse, news cameras had already assembled. The story of the heiress who told a judge that wealthy families allowed him to dispense justice was already going viral. By evening, Victoria Ashford Chen's words would be quoted on every major news network, dissected on social media, used as an example of everything wrong with wealth and privilege. Her family's lawyers would scramble to control the damage. Her father would issue statements about how his daughter's words didn't reflect the family's values. Her mother would cry in interviews about how prison was too harsh a punishment for a young woman who'd simply made a mistake, but none of it would change the fundamental equation. Victoria had revealed who she really was in that courtroom, not through her actions on the day of the accident, but through her words before sentencing. She'd shown the world that she believed herself to be a different category of human being, one to whom the normal rules didn't apply. And Judge Elias Monroe had shown her and everyone watching that she was wrong. Marcus Webb gave a brief statement on the courthouse steps, his broken arm in its cast resting against his chest. "I just want to say that I never wanted to ruin anyone's life," he said quietly. "I just wanted to be treated like I mattered, like what happened to me mattered. And today the judge showed me that it does. That I do. That's all I ever wanted, just to matter as much as anyone else." The words were simple, but they cut to the heart of everything. In a world that often measured worth in wealth and status and influence, Marcus Webb had stood before the law and been seen as fully human, neither more nor less valuable than anyone else. That was the promise of justice, the dream of equal protection under law. It didn't always work. The system failed too often, bent too easily to pressure and power. But on this day, in this courtroom, With this judge, the promise had been kept. If this story of wealth meeting consequence resonated with you, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel for more stories where justice prevails over privilege. Drop a comment below saying "Justice for all," or tell us where you're watching from. Let's build a community that believes accountability should have no price tag. The algorithm only shows these stories to people who engage, so your like and comment actually matter. Let's prove that there's an audience for real justice, the kind that doesn't bend to money or status. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's keep reminding the world that the law should be the same for everyone. No exceptions, no excuses, no special treatment for those who think their bank account makes them untouchable.